explorer Raad on his continuing journey of discovery into life's challenges, opportunities, options, and all the latest and greatest things that come with getting older. The Raad Life is brought to you this week by Your Home for a Lifetime, a company dedicated to empowering you to stay safely, independently, and comfortably in your own home. And now here is your host, Raad.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Raad Life. It is the last month of the show. Paul's shaking his head. Sorry, but
I'm going to miss these last minute panic. Nobody has a clue what goes on before the show starts. And I always preface it by saying,
what are you talking about exactly?
I always I go do quick story and then we'll let you launch in. So years ago, I was an entertainment publicist. Used to go down regularly to the local news channels. We get somebody on, or the Tonight Show or something. And I was always amazed. If you watch here in Los Angeles, KABC, for example, I'm just going to pick on them. Any of them are all the same. 30 seconds before they go, they're counting down 10, 9, 8, and people are frantic and wires are flying and people are screaming, "Where's my script?" and blah, 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 blah. And then it's like 3, 2, 1, and they go, "Hi, good evening, welcome to that's the Raad Life." Every week we're sitting here going live and we're doing this, and he's calling me, how do I get on, and everything else, and then it's just right as the music, he just, "Hi, Raad here." It's always like that. Always.
I think I'll take that as a compliment.
I don't. All I know is you just have this exquisite timing to the second. You sit, you do it, and you act like no big deal, like you've been sitting there for 20 minutes preparing this. You were on 2 seconds.
Actually, it's my second cup of coffee, but thanks for asking.
So today, you have an equally mind-numbing conversation,
yes,
like you
I
always
do,
have.
It's not the first time that he has been here to mind-numb us anyway.
We were chatting beforehand a bit. I'll let you introduce him here in a second, but he's got some radical ideas about housing here in Orange County.
Okay.
I don't know.
Stop giving it away, Paul.
Okay.
You just can't help yourself. 6 years into this, you still can't.
You want the long tease, the 20-minute intro here.
Yeah. So, like I said, everybody, thanks for joining us on the Raad Life. This month will be the last month of us doing this for 6 years. And so, first and foremost, I want to just thank everybody. For being there, being supportive, being part of this journey. We've got a couple of additional guests. Today's guest, my good friend Logan Motorshami, who's been on the show before. There's a couple of other people coming on. And then the last episode will be on the 26th of May. And for those who are in the know, or if you would like to come on and share with us your thoughts on the show, maybe some things that you liked about it, even some things that you may have not liked about it, because I have a feeling we'll be doing digital content. It just may not be under the banner of the Raad Life going forward. Please mark your calendar, save the date. 12 o'clock on May 26th will be the very, very last episode, and I would love to have you guys come join us on Zoom, share your thoughts. We'll give out a telephone number as well, and I'll put it out there. You can call in, but I really would like for you guys to log in and just show your face and give us an opportunity to thank you in person and for being there as being part of this sort of journey of exploration. So without further ado, again, mark your calendar, May 26th. Logan is on here because Logan, for those who don't know, is the man to talk about housing. He is the guy.
He impressed me, just the chatting we were doing beforehand as we're waiting for you to come on here. I'm going to disappear in a second, but...
Yeah, you need to say good night, Gracie.
All right, good night.
Okay. So, hi, Logan. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. It's good to see you. You well? Everything's good with you?
Retirement is great, man. I got to tell you.
Wow, there's a news announcement right there. So, Logan... Again, you are very prolific, man, and you are very opinionated, and you definitely share that, and I mean that in a positive way. And it's really good because for a lot of us out there, housing as a subject matter on its own is a little bit of an issue. Like we don't know what to make of it. We don't know how to track it. What's around the corner, and then we have a crisis like COVID. And we have changes in how people are basically, reacting to their living environments, how people are reacting to increase in pricing, jobs, people are moving out of state. I mean, to a certain extent, and especially in California, there's always been that kind of movement to one degree or the other, right? But we really are, I mean, I don't know, you tell me. I think we're experiencing a different situation here right now than I've ever seen, at least in the foreseeable past. And so for those who don't know you, take a minute and give them the background. And then let's delve into it, because I am, honest to God, I am at a loss of what's happening, why it's happening, what's around the corner, you know, but at the same time, we all either own property or are basically impacted by property values and what we do as a business. So Mike's yours, my friend. Tell people who you are.
Okay, my name is Logan Motorshami. I'm a lead analyst for Housing Wire. I've been a financial blogger specializing in the housing market and the general economy since 2010. I was also in the mortgage business for 24 years. I retired last year. So pretty much all I do is look at charts all day and night. And I think for this conversation, for me, for a lot of my work, the people that followed me for the years, I've always said that housing is a year's 2020 to 2024 story. And I talk with that premise, talking about 2008 to 2019, we're gonna have the weakest housing recovery ever. Now, the problem is that when people think recovery, they think of home prices, existing home sales prices, but it's really new home sales, housing starts, mortgage demand. And post 1996, and I use 1996 as my starting point, when mortgage rates made another leg lower, adjusting to population, our labor force and workforce grew. It's really rare in America to have home sales under 4 million. It's only happened 3 times since 1996. 2 of those were just kind of one-time events, the 1-month delay in COVID, and then also the homebuyer tax credit in 2010, the aftermath of that. So the only time that we actually authentically saw existing home sales go below 4 million was in 2008. That was the tail end of the housing crisis. That was the beginning of the weaker demographic patch that I've always talked about. So then here comes 2020. And when I think of all this on the economic side of things, it's actually February of 2020. The month before COVID hit us, housing authentically broke out data-wise. It was new home sales, existing home sales, housing starts, everything broke out right on cue, because years 2020 to 2024 has the best housing demographic patch ever recorded in US history. What I mean by demographic patch is that ages currently right now, ages 27 to 33 are the biggest in US history, about 32.5 million. If you take them plus move up buyers, move down buyers, cash buyers, investors, you put everything into the same boat. Total home sales, existing and new home sales combined, should be over 6.2 million, something that I've never forecast or never even talked about from 2008 to 2019. So here's COVID, right? Economic data was getting a little bit better toward at the end of 2019, and then January, February looked really good. So here's this crisis where it is generally not an economics crisis, but a health crisis. So on April 7th last year, I wrote an economic model called the America's Back. Right, and it gave people certain dates and data lines to follow, especially with the bond market and with COVID, that if this goes right, we'll recover in 2020.
Okay.
And then everybody said, how's that possible? Housing's going to crash. Well, there was no housing boom to start off with. Credit was fine. These homeowners, if you look at their profiles, were the best we've ever had. So after 5 weeks, we had this decline in purchase application data. It stopped. And then we saw this V-shaped recovery. In all economic data pretty much almost had a V-shaped recovery for jobs, but housing just basically continued what it did. People buy homes for shelter. The trolling of housing over the last 8 or 10 years has been to talk about a crash and everything. And I call these the housing bubble boys. If you actually listen to their stuff as a data person, none of them have any idea what they're talking about, but they're really good grifters. Right? So doom and gloom sells everything, come click my subscription, none of their things were economically valid. So the conversation was lost and everybody assumed that we're going to go to crash. And it just didn't happen. Demand never actually went down. It was paused and it just came back. In fact, I would argue that we never actually recovered the total existing home sales we should have had last year. We got to only 5.64 million. That's only 130,000 more homes sold than 2017 levels. So there's no credit boom here, but housing has built-in demographic replacement demand.
So that is fascinating because it really shows that there's no real connectivity between what was going on in 2020 in terms of a health crisis and that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was really a delay. We oversold. We had in the stock market, they say you have oversold conditions. The fear of the virus and what it did to consumer behavior was the biggest economic event I believe I'll ever see in my life. Because usually we have very sticky economic data. It just went in a waterfall. Yeah. And I know myself in Irvine, I literally went to my Albertsons that's always packed in terms of food. There's hardly anyone there. It was sold out, everything, no bread, no food. And I was just getting baby carrots for my tortoise. And I was thinking, everybody's here is about to have a 1-year winter. This is not normal. This can't continue. So I told people by May 18th, things are going to calm down. And by July 15th, you're going to get the June data and housing should be fine. And that's exactly what happened. We just came back to where we were. Mm-hmm. So naturally, everybody thinks housing has to crash because of the 2008 model, right? Everybody thinks that, well, 2002 to 2005, you had a credit bubble. Home prices were well above per capita income. The credit that needed demand to stay at those high levels were going away. It's the exact opposite of that period. So there was no crash. And then naturally what happens, the housing bubble boys whiffed. So they said, well, it's forbearance. If it wasn't for forbearance, then housing would crash. Not true. Demand never fell. Demand was always stable and rebounded. You don't have an escape velocity of supply to crash prices, right? So demand was there. And now I even coined the term forbearance crash bros. Like these people aren't economic or financial people. They can't realize that these people are just going to get off of forbearance on their own. Forbearance was almost at 5 million. That's a little bit smaller than the shadow inventory. Within 1 year, forbearance has come down in half, right? And this
they were looking for something to try to use as an excuse of what would potentially could happen. But no, I mean,
the jobs came back.
Sorry?
And then the first wave.
You froze, Logan. You're frozen. I'm not sure, people, what's going on here. We might be having a technical difficulty with the feed from Logan, but as he was saying, you basically are not looking at a bubble. You're not looking at something that's going to crash, and it flies in the face of what instinctively you would think is the case with COVID. Logan, welcome back. You kind of froze there for a second.
Oh yeah.
The reason, I mean, for people who are listening, the reason I wanted you to come on is because exactly that. Like the impression is, and I don't know whether it's because it's a human impression that we're going through difficulties, so therefore it will affect everything, or what have you, or maybe it's like it's time, or what have you. But it's like, or prices are going up, and so like no, that's got to come down. This is not a bubble. To your point, this is not a bubble. This is not something that is unusual. The trend was going in this direction to begin with. It actually just did not react to anything. It just did its own thing through a period of time where people are basically looking at, well, we're in crisis. Well, not in this case. So the thing about it that I find fascinating is we're also continuing to not only have increase in price of value property, but also the fact that now, which again kind of flies in the face of what would be maybe conventional or messed up thinking, you have people that are basically putting on down offers, and then there's like multiple cash offers, counter offers that are coming in very quickly over a very short period of time. So can you speak to that? Because that's sort of a little bit of a different situation.
And here's the unique pattern. This is not because housing demand is really booming. We have a credit boom in the previous cycle, but mortgage purchase application data, if you adjust it to COVID, it's not that much higher. What's happened is we have an inventory crunch. And if you look at total inventory from 2014, it's every year has gone down. Purchase application data from 2014 has gone up. So it got to the point to where it's 2020 to 2024. So this is kind of my little baby. I said, you have to worry about home prices taking off here, because one thing that's different in the post 2008, people are staying in their homes longer. Mm-hmm. From 1985 to 2007, the housing tenure was about 5 years. Post 2008, it's 10 years. So you could kind of see this coming, that as long as mortgage demand grew, total inventory will fall. Well, in 2020 to 2024, we just have a little bit more people that need shelter. And you have to look at housing as this. It's not like a stock. A lot of people treat housing like it's a stock that, well, people are just going to wait and pull back and buy. No, Millions of people buy homes every year because it's the cost of shelter to their own capacity to own the debt. It's just that years 2020 to 2024 has the best housing demographics ever. It's never going to be like this ever again. We're never going to have this many people looking for homes. And unfortunately, what happened is total inventory has dropped down. And the only mechanism that's always cooled down housing in the previous cycle has been higher mortgage rates. And our economic data would warrant higher mortgage rates and higher bond yields, but the world is still dealing with COVID. Their economic data isn't as good as ours. So we don't have that stabilizing effect. And again, this is my biggest concern. When you have the best housing demographics ever and the lowest mortgage rates ever, it seems like there's these multiple bids and cashing, there's all this demand. It's more of it's actually not more, it's a total inventory story right here. Because I think in the 1980s, there was this game called Hungry, Hungry Hippo, where everybody would hit there's 4 hippos and there's a bunch of balls. Imagine if there's only 1 ball. That's kind of housing. So everybody needs to get that ball. So it seems like, well, what's going on here? It's not because it's a credit boom. It's just that people want somewhere to live because they need somewhere to live. It's not an investment for them. They just need home. So they're willing, they make good money, they're willing to come in there and pay over the listing price. And I think it's strange for people to think that you're getting outbid by your fellow American who simply makes more money and has more cash than you. When for all this time where people have said, well, Americans don't make money, they have no cash, they're student loan debt rights. None of that was true. You just adjust things to demographics, and then all the housing sales data looks normal to you. And in this case, it's a 100% inventory crunch. There's actually not that much year-over-year mortgage demand growth from last year, but the data is all messed up because COVID had this long delay for like 2 months, and then this unbelievable rebound. We had like about a 2.7 million sales rebound within 6 months. So it needs to balance itself out. So after you do the balances, we'll have slightly, maybe a couple 100,000 more homes sold this year than last year. But the price is, I would argue, is unwarranted, the rate of growth, just because it's an inventory crunch. If there was more inventory, you probably have more sales and kind of a lower rate of growth pricing. And we kind of lost that with COVID. So it's a chaos theory almost. That event has created this overheating housing because the demographics were here always.
Let's talk about that for a minute in terms of the inventory, right? Because I remember back in '91 when we had the crisis come in. One of the things was that came out of that as a learning thing is not to basically overbuild, right? I remember that being part of what kind of the revelation. Well, here we are. I mean, we obviously have an increasing population. To your point, there's a larger group of people that are coming in as home buyers because of their demographic, their socioeconomic standings. There's a credit, in the system. What is the cause for that lack of inventory? Because you would think, supply and demand, right? I mean, prices are being driven by the lack of inventory, and I get that, and it makes perfect sense. Why? Is it a conscious decision not to overbuild? Is it a policy situation? What is it?
If you look at the new home sales data from 2008 to 2019, it was the weakest new home sales recovery ever in history. The demand for the builders never warranted it. And I always say that, when new home sales are doing good, when monthly supply is below 4.3 months. That never happened from 2008 to 2019. As soon as 2020 came, that occurred. So the builders never oversupply a market. They just basically build homes to which they can sell. So you had that problem. And then again, the housing tenure issue is problematic. If people are staying in their homes longer, if baby boomers aren't downsizing, this is what happens. You get an inventory crunch. So unless the government does federal deficit financing to build homes and nobody worries about not making money, then we're stuck by this equilibrium of supply and demand balance for the builders. And again, we built a lot of homes, from the 1950s and on. Builders, their main competition is the existing home sale market. That's a much bigger market, cheaper homes geographically all over. So they've got to be a little bit mindful. And people forget, in 2018, when mortgage rates hit 5%, the builders had a supply spike. Their stocks were down 30 to 40%. Yeah. So they're like, at that time, they're thinking, whoa, we got to slow production down. So they don't have too much to work with in the past cycle because there were many years that they missed their sales estimates. But now, as you can see, you just ran into this massive demographic patch, and we see this in all the economic data for housing. Demand is just a little bit better now, but the inventory crunch is real.
Well, and we've talked about this on the show too, with people who are basically aging in place, staying in their homes longer. You know, it's the property, like you said, it went from 5 to 10. I mean, that it doubled in terms of duration of time, right? So, and people are not really scaling down. They're not, I should say, slowing down. They're just maybe scaling down, or they're upgrading but staying in areas. I mean, it kind of makes perfect sense. Why would you, as you get older, basically move from a familiar environment that you're very comfortable in, unless you absolutely have to? So what do you see about the affordability? I mean, you got a whole bunch of people that are coming into this market. They're first time buyers. You know, and equally the people that are looking to sell their home. Let's say that people want to take advantage of the market right now because of the price point, right? And they want to sell their homes, right? What is the likelihood that somebody who sells their home today at the top of the market is going to be able to find an affordable alternative to stay within the area? Or is it basically, I made a decision to move out of state?
Well, here's the thing. If there was an affordability crisis, the data wouldn't be looking like this. So the demand is fine. It's stable. What's occurring right now is that you have stress in the marketplace, not just from buyers, but sellers also need to find. So if you don't think that you can actually sell your property and find a home to live in, it's very difficult for a seller right now.
Right.
And one of the things I like to tell people, if you look at American home prices, we're so cheap compared to France, Canada,
Right.
New Zealand, Australia, like those countries, their real home prices are so far ahead of us. There's no way we can catch them. So it might seem like there's an affordability crisis, or there's people can't buy. If you look at per capita income to home prices, we finally caught up. Where home prices actually caught up to per capita income. We're so far away from 2005 levels to where home prices deviated from per capita income. We're not going to get there anytime soon. But if this price increase keeps on happening, it will happen. It'll impact sales definitely down the line. This is why it's a very unhealthy housing market. And we need higher rates are the only thing that solves this, because there's not going to be a foreclosure wave. The forced selling maybe that some people thought with forbearance isn't going to be that big. And I do think in time we'll see that, because there's no credit bubble. And because there's no credit bubble, you're bounded by limits. And we see that this year. Demand is fine, but it's not booming. And this is why it's a very unhealthy market, because if it's one thing, if purchase application data, if it was really up 30, 40% year over year, then at least that's the demand pushing it through. If you do some major COVID adjustments, we're barely up, but we have these double-digit price gains. And then, of course, years 2020 to 2024, that's one of the things I talk about, is that's when people will move, right? That's the time frame, because we're going to have a lot of people ages 30 to 39. So it's the same thesis I talk about at every conference I speak at. People rent, they date, they mate, they get married. 3.5 years after marriage, they have kids. Years 2020 to 24, you get people moving. So even without COVID or the work from home model, you have people going to other states, or not even leaving the state of California. We see that in the data now.
The other areas, right?
Yeah, majority of people that left, let's say the big cities, actually just moved east a little bit, stayed in California. They didn't really go away so much. So it all makes sense, because again, if you're having kids and you need a little bit bigger room, you move a little bit. Or if you're downsizing, you can take your California or New York money and go to Boise, Idaho, or go to Montana, or go somewhere.
Right.
The prices there do not seem high to you. Like median price in Montana is $320,000. Here in Irvine, my 1-bedroom condo in my neighborhood is $500,000. So it's just, especially if you can work from home, or you're taking some of that income and some of that equity, or you're going to an area where you're like, you can't believe how small home prices are. So California is unique in the sense that there's America and then there's California home prices. So sometimes we get stuck with California home prices, especially near the water, and then everywhere else, it's not that expensive compared to California.
So do you see any part of the housing sector, because I mean, you got single family homes, you got multi-units, you got Are you seeing any area in that housing or construction sector for housing that is in a different shift or a different play or coming up?
Well, I think the big problem I see going on in the future is if lumber prices stay this high and mortgage rates rise, it's going to impact the sector. For now, lumber prices aren't a problem because the builders can handle it and they can still sell their product. The multifamily construction is actually weak, especially on a year-over-year basis, because a lot of the growth is coming to single-family homes. So you could probably see some growth in the future in the multifamily sector. But when higher rates come, I think the builders get hit with that because right now they're passing the cost on, or they're eating a little bit on the margin side. But lumber prices is really going to be difficult if mortgage rates go up 1% for the builders right now.
And okay, so I know it's not necessarily your area as far as it's not housing, but let's just talk about real estate in general. What's the situation with commercial real estate? Do you have any idea like what's going on with that? Because that seems to be doing its own thing completely. And especially now with things changing as far as, remote work opportunities, people looking for hybrid situations, real estate allocation, utilization is shifting. One person did tell me though something earlier today that I found fascinating while we were basically all caught up in this hype of everybody wanting to work remote, and said to me that, well, that's all fine and dandy until some people come back into the office and then you realize that, wait a minute, I'm not in the room. Even though I'm doing a good job, I'm not the person whose face that manager sees every day, so I may miss out on some opportunities. But can you talk about? Can you share anything about commercial?
Here's the thing: the work from home model or the commercial downsizing, you're going to have to wait probably a year when everyone can walk to earth before making really big long-term thinking on this. Because generally, what happens in a crisis historically stays in a crisis.
Okay.
So as much as I am such a big fan of the work from home model, just because it's the newest, most spectacular variable in real estate in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Like it changes everything. But I'm also bounded by history to think that we've had pandemics before, and usually after 15, 18 months, things get better and people go back to how their normal life is. There are some tech companies that can take advantage of this. I'm not sure it's going to be as big as people think. And there's always the, well, everyone's back in the office and I'm not.
Yeah,
so
you're not in the room.
Yeah, so
you're not where the deal is being made.
It's something you need time to see if it actually takes bigger. There's going to be a change, of course. There are already companies that say nobody needs to come back to the office. They're going to reduce their pool, but I as much as I love the idea, I need time to see if this actually makes sense for companies or even for people, because a lot of people are, when everybody's in the office, some companies have said, listen, we're going back to work. We're not doing this. You either quit that company and you got to go somewhere else, or, you're kind of left out. So I think we need time to see how much this really impacts the commercial area, because generally, things that happen in a crisis in scale don't stay the same. People go back to normal, they do their normal living things. And if that's the case, then commercial will come back, maybe not to the extent as it ever will be. I just think there's a limited few amount of companies that can do work from home successfully in a big scale in relationship to their workforce. Like, don't employ a lot of people.
Well, and you look at companies that basically are thinking about doing that or being forced by their employees to do that, because there was a survey that came out a couple of weeks ago that talked about 1 in 3 basically would go look for another job with a different company if they're asked to return full time. At least at the time when they were asked that question, there were 2 out of 3 that said I would want a hybrid format of not being in the office all the time. I think there will be some adjustment that happens, but at the end of the day, it's kind of that human feeling. When I was told when that person shared with me, well, if you're not in the room, you're not in the deal. I said, okay, you know what? That's human behavior at 101. It is definitely going to work out that way to a certain extent. But let me just finish. With the commercial real estate also, and this goes to COVID, and a lot of things that basically we're accrediting for COVID, COVID didn't really do anything new, I think, as much as other than the health component, other than escalate maybe or expedite what was already happening. Like commercial real estate was already being impacted by changes in retail purchasing habits, things of that nature. The old model was not working. You needed to reinvent the wheel. The big boxes could not work. Places were closing down. That was all happening before COVID. COVID just maybe accelerated the demise of some of those things that were trying to hold on. I think to your point, I mean, HR will be affected if everybody basically now is working from home. How do you evaluate all this stuff? There's a whole need to reinvent the infrastructure for companies, which is a very costly proposition.
I think Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan said this. He's ordered everyone back because they lost a deal because the people that got the deal from them that they didn't get, they actually went and visited the people face to face, and all they did is they had Zoom, and it was a big deal financially for JP Morgan, and they said, nope, we're not doing this. Again, it's one of these things, we have to wait and see, because I'm such a fan of this idea of work from home, but it's just historically we don't really change too much as people. So I need more evidence to see what companies actually do.
Pressing the flesh, shaking the hand, the body language of somebody meeting in person. That is so ingrained in the human psyche that I don't think you can eliminate it. And then there's a social component to it that will also never be matched by anything virtual. I mean, we all know that, more and more time is spent by people virtual on social media and things of that nature. And that is a very empty experience compared to something else. Now, to your point, there may be people that don't know enough because they have, they're younger, maybe they haven't experienced the alternative, and this is all they know. But there's a human component, a DNA component that kicks in, and I think that's the case. One thing I do want to cover with you, because I'm curious if you're seeing any of this already starting to manifest itself. To your point, we've been through pandemics before, right? Actually, one of the things I used to say last year when everybody was basically flying off the handle and so what should we do and all this stuff, and I said, I don't know. This is my first pandemic. How about you, right? I don't have a reference point to how to deal with a pandemic, but pandemics have happened in the past, right? And anybody who doesn't believe that, go to Netflix and watch, and I'll post it somewhere. It's like American History or American Mysteries or something like that. And there was an episode that was on the 1918 pandemic. Ironically, it aired in March of 2019. So literally a year before the thing. So if you had watched that in 2019, you would have been basically prepared for what's going to happen in March 2020. And we've been through pandemics before. And pandemics in the past, from my perspective on the design side, have led to things like how we address bathrooms, how we address kitchens, materials that are used, things like that start out maybe in a medical answer to the solution to a problem that then basically translated into residential environments, and in fact became almost like a luxury product option as an upgrade. Are you seeing some of that stuff, like, for example, with air quality, water quality, things of that nature, that the human psyche has been altered in terms of what it's looking for because of this experience that we'll basically now start seeing into the built environment?
Well, I got myself an air purifier for my house,
To answer the question right there.
Yeah, so I think companies and people develop new ideas through every crisis, and they look back to think about what could they have done better in their lives. So there's going to be a new wave of creations of things to be more healthy, maybe. Germs, stuff like that, where we don't really spend too much time on before. Now we get to see there's going to be a lot of investment, I think, into what you're discussing about, because again, if there's demand, if there's a need, money will go there. So I definitely do think there will be a new wave of kind of thinking of being healthy, retrofitting commercial offices or homes to a more a lifestyle that is just generally more healthy. And if this ever happened again, you're kind of a little bit more prepared for it. So there's always new things that come out from every crisis as well. So I do think that'll come, and it'll be very interesting to see where it goes with the money. As you can see, countries, people are flushed with the ability to borrow at very cheap rates. So it is something that we're doing our own major infrastructure plan for the first time like ever. That actually was a notable infrastructure. So we'll see some new retrofittings post-COVID that will be directly 100% correlating to what people experienced in the COVID crisis.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, and again, it's sort of a natural evolution of going through an experience like this, especially as a common experience. That's in this case a global common experience. And I think, like I had a conversation also the other day about the fact that there would be some sort of I would want to have maybe my digital record saying that I've been vaccinated. I've been vaccinated, 2 vaccines. I'm done. I don't want to use the word passport because it's a trigger word, but having that in place, because airlines are going to, for longer time than basically when restaurants are open, you don't have to wear a mask. Airlines are going to probably still require it. You may even feel better, just like in Asia, you might feel better to be additionally protected in an environment that's small, but you're going to also have to be able to claim, and quantifiably so, that the air quality in your business, in your strip mall that you're trying to lease to people, has like a 99% particle capture or something like that. I think it's going to become a minimum requirement, and also potentially leading up to when everybody has it, it could become a competitive advantage for somebody who's trying to basically lease, like say, for example, commercial real estate. Homes, I know those systems out there right now that could go and retrofit existing air conditioning systems that would basically give additional energy efficiency on the existing units, plus do that 90% capture in the home. So you don't have to have the individual purification units in each room. You can actually have the whole environment protected. And I think you're right. The money will follow the innovation. The money will always follow the demand. If there's a demand for it, somebody's going to be an early adapter. They're going to bring it to the market. And that's going to be the case. Okay, so before we end, though, I want to ask you this, because we obviously are seeing also opportunity in the real estate business, right? In the home purchasing and property purchasing business, people are buying properties, they're turning them into Airbnb still. Where do you see? You said between 20 and 24, it's going to be a very interesting situation, right? So we are coming into 2021, or we are in 2021. Where do you see somebody who's basically looking to invest in the sector, or basically looking to take advantage of opportunities looking forward? Where is that?
Well, I think the one area that we see in housing that is significant change are these second homes. I know in Lake Tahoe and some of these other kind of resort areas, they're booming. They're actually, in fact, the demand was so strong that some of the government agencies have reduced credit because it was above their cap ratios. So that is an area that people took interest. It's not terribly big in the big picture of housing, but there was noticeable increase in demand for second homes in Palm Springs, Lake Tahoe, these kind of areas that people were grabbing in. Some of that has to do with work from home, right? So if you can work from home and I'm just going to live in my Palm Springs place, so there's some of that.
I can't get a contractor to basically waterproof a cabin in Big Bear because the contractor has been so busy up there all year round. And a lot of people who own property are now working from those properties, and they didn't have proper lighting. They didn't have proper plumbing because it was just like a weekend getaway, and now they're staying in there a longer period of time, so they're upgrading all this stuff.
Big Bear, Palm Springs, Lake Tahoe, these places that aren't as expensive as San Francisco, Orange County, and LA.
Well, and it's also a local staycation sort of that has now become a workcation, right? Because it's proximity, it's close. You're not having to get on like public transportation or some sort of airline or whatever to get there. So there's a safety component, but that's interesting. So that's because of now, right? And some of this will basically then lend itself to that hybrid work environment. So I can basically do this. But what happens with those properties, basically, when we come back to a little bit more of a normal work environment, those second homes, are they now going to become an opportunity for sale? Is the price going to drop down?
I think people rent them out.
So it's an income revenue generator.
I mean, the thing about, a lot of people asked me, they're like, all these so-called real estate investor experts that said housing was a crash, what did they do with their homes? None of them sold them. These so-called experts, none of these people sold their homes. It was a very liquid market. They didn't. And one of the things now is that people have to realize, in a very low interest rate environment, a complete world that has low interest rates, rental yield is better than cash, it's better than bonds, and it's better than CDs.
Absolutely.
So a lot of investors, you know, there's nowhere else they could put their money that will give them some kind of rental yield income.
Right.
And that's why they keep those properties. That's why you never saw the big wave of investors. Now, of course, the eviction moratorium, stuff like that has held some of these. There are going to be mom and pop landlords who are, get me out of this house. I don't want to be a landlord ever again. That'll happen for sure. But in big theory is that why don't investors sell? Because they're looking at the rental yield and it's good, and rents are going to pick up again. Because, you know, when people are working, especially if wages go up, that's where they could get the better than cash CD and bonds investments.
Well,
So
and there's a lack of supply in that capacity, in that category too, right? I mean, as far as rental units, especially in, you know, bedroom communities like Orange County bedroom communities.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not as bad as the housing situation, but yeah, I mean, I think the rental yield is too good to pass up for people that are looking to make money. So it's just one of these, like I'm a landlord. I haven't charged rent on my property since COVID started. So
Right.
I'm not one of those people that are looking for the money, but I could totally see why people are holding on to real estate investment, because they're seeing, well, when these people are employed, they need somewhere to live. That rental yield looks really good when bonds, CDs, and cash are this low.
Yeah, so again, you know, the old adage of, you know, as long as you don't have to get rid of real estate, hold on to it, because the appreciation, like in this case, rental income, you know, all of that stuff is basically more golden than anything you can ever get as far as a return in all of the other possible investment situations, especially in areas like this where we're kind of like, you know, because of location, destination, weather, all that stuff, all factors into basically the likelihood is never, unless you have a major economic meltdown, that you're not going to basically get hit with it, or the appreciation of the value at least is not.
Yeah, I think one thing people have to realize, the United States of America is very unique in the sense that for the next 3 decades, we're like the only mature economy that has a growing prime age labor force. There's other countries, of course, India, Africa, parts of the Middle East that are very young. But I'm talking about mature, developed economies. We're the only country. Japan doesn't have it. China doesn't have it. Europe doesn't have it. But we're the only ones that our prime age, ages 25 to 54, are growing. And for the next 3 decades, none of those countries actually have that. And that's why I say, like, when I show people the home prices of France, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all these, they're so much higher than ours because rates are low. New Zealand is up like 23% year over year, and they're finally like, oh my God, we need our Federal Reserve to target this. So home prices might seem high because they're a little bit above where they were in 2006, but that necessarily doesn't mean everything's a bubble. If you look at, you have to look at per capita income, mortgage rates, you have to put all these different variables. And I think that's why it was the big whip. That's why I said that these group of American citizens who were what I call the housing bubble boys had the biggest whiff ever recorded in history, because if you actually look at the census data and where mortgage rates were, to get a crash, you would need existing home sales to go really below 3 million, something that's never happened post 1996. So you have the best demographic paths and mortgage rates. And even in the worst month of COVID, we still had over 133 million people working. You only need about 4 million mortgage buyers a year to stay stable. So it was such a sharp recovery off of that delayed, 2 months. That it shocked people. People had anticipated 2008. I think that's the problem of being stuck in 2008. I see a lot of labor economists that are still stuck in 2008. When we have more job openings today than any period, during the previous expansion, outside of maybe 2 or 3 months. So demand is there. I mean, the U.S. has this advantage: reserve currency of the world, really good demographics, low rates, real wages, to disposable incomes at pre-cycle or above the pre-COVID levels. And we have an excess savings rate. Like, our savings rate just blew up because of all this fiscal disaster relief. It was so much higher than it's ever been right now, especially the previous expansion. But even if you go back to when interest rates were high and people had more money in their cash accounts, higher than that. So we have somewhat like a roaring 20s backdrop, just because we have good demographics, we have excess savings. And now on top of everything else, you're getting fiscal stimulus on top of everything. So you have this very unique, and housing would have been fine if this didn't even happen on its own, but now you've got some juice to go with it. And again, the bigger concern is home prices escalate. And that's why, my Bloomberg interviews, I keep on talking about that all the time for the last few months. This is what we should worry about. Don't worry about this crash. We need rates to rise to cool this down, because this could get out of hand. And it's gone out of hand. You know, 2020, if 2020 and 2021 hasn't showed you why demographics matter and mortgage rates matter, there's no time in history that it's not going to be that.
So what do you think the likelihood is for those interest rates to go up? I mean, is that a way that they're going to basically use?
We need the world economies to get back online. And that's the only reason. Our economic data warrants 4.5%, 5% mortgage rates where we are, growth, inflation expectations, but the world economies aren't. They're not where we are, and that's holding rates at bay.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it from the expert himself. Where can people find out more about you and your coverage and articles?
You know, if you just type in my name, Logan Motorshami, there's tons of pages out there. I have my own blog, loganmotorshami.com. I write for Housing Wire. They're exclusive content articles for them. I go on Bloomberg once a month to talk about housing. So I'm out there. I've got a unique name, so it's not that hard to find.
Yeah, and guys, I mean, seriously, he is my go-to. I blocked out everybody else because the man knows his stuff. He is very data. I mean, I don't think there's anybody who's more of a data wonk than you are.
This is what I tell people. Economics done right should be terribly boring. People want to make economics like some sexy thing. No, economics done right is terribly boring. You always want to be the detective. Don't be the troll. Trolling people don't look at data. Be the detective. Let the numbers talk to you. Find it for yourself. Anybody can do it, right? But you can't be the troll.
No, and you've always done that. Like, and that's what I appreciate as a person who has a degree in economics, a person who basically is looking for that sugar-coated 8x10 glossy. Right? Whether I like the story, I don't like the story, but at least it's very informative. And I think, again, I encourage everybody to basically follow Logan, listen to what he's doing. He's really usually way ahead of the curve on a lot of this stuff. And he just gave you projections to 2024. So you heard it from the guy himself. Logan, thank you for being on the show again. I really appreciate your time, my friend. It's good to see you.
Me too.
I hope to see you next month. Look for an email from me. I just sent you one today.
Is Logan going to be at the wrap party?
It's by invitation only. Don't be giving it away.
All right. Private wrap party for this show here. Call Raad to get in because reservations are going fast.
We're having a wrap party next month for the Raad Life, again, to really celebrate the guests and the people that have been extremely supportive over the last 6 years. And like I said earlier, I don't know that we're walking away from digital content development. However, the Raad Life, I think we have interviewed a lot of people. We've had pleasure of having people on like Logan here, and it's good. I think I'm going to be developing some other people's shows, giving people, another chance to have a voice and kind of help them amplify it. And I'm sure I'll show up. I mean, Paul and I were talking about maybe doing a special Raad Life, like maybe election season or on topics like affordable housing and stuff like that. So stay tuned. There may be some, you might not be done with me completely, but thanks everybody. Thank you, Logan, Paul, always a pleasure. And join us next week. We're going to have a lady on that we're going to talk about style in the age of Zoom.
What?
I'll leave you with that.
All right.
Thank you, Logan. Have a great time, everybody. Thanks for being on the Raad Life with us again this week. See you next week.
You have been listening to the Raad Life Radio Show with your host and age explorer, Raad Gantos, brought to you on the one and only octalkradio.net. Join us again next week as we continue our journey of discovery into life's challenges, opportunities, options, and all the latest and greatest things that come with getting older.